Salutations, people! Welcome to Page 3 Killers, Murders That Went Unnoticed, a podcast where we dive into the murder cases that went unnoticed by our nation's newspapers.
Hi, Shay.
Hey, John.
Hi, people.
Hi, guys.
And welcome to episode 10, Page 3 Killers, Murders That Went Unnoticed.
Wow, can you believe it? Episode 10 already.
Yeah, you'd think after 10 episodes I'd know what our podcast is called.
Well, I'll edit that up. They won't know. They'll never know.
Well, now they will.
Oh, no.
Anyway, hopefully our audio sounds a little bit better than normal, because we got some new equipment.
Yeah, so we could really start using some patrons hitting us up in that Patreon. That would be really great.
I don't even need that. I just need people to listen to it.
Yeah, I would be happy if we can get 100 subscribers by the end of the first season.
That'd be cool.
I would be happy with 25. So this week's episode, we have a really good one. I found this one really neat. Well, not neat for, the people that got killed, but neat for us because we get to talk about it. And that would be Dr. No, also known as the Ohio prostitute killer and the I-71 killer. You know, when I first saw that on the thing, I thought prostate. I almost said prostate.
Yeah, he's a prostate. He's the doctor, so.
It's prostitute killer. The Ohio prostitute killer and the I-71 killer.
I don't know what would be worse, being killed as a prostitute or being killed during your prostate exam.
I think being killed during your prostate exam would be scarier. Well, maybe a little more undignified.
I guess when you compare that to a prostitute, I don't know.
But before we get started with our main topic tonight, let's talk about our drink special for this evening.
If I have to. Another week, another cocktail. This week, we're looking at my personal favorite cocktail, the Old Fashioned. Now, this cocktail is very old, which is why it's called the Old Fashioned. It dates back to the 19th century. But it's changed over the years, so this recipe may differ from what you've heard other people make. Starting off with our liquor, which we're going to use rye. You can also use bourbon or brandy. And we're going to use a sugar cube instead of a simple syrup or any other type of sweetener. And the way I like to do it is you put the sugar cube on top of a spoon over your tumbler. And then you're going to pour your rye over top of it so it helps dissolve some of the sugar before putting it into the tumbler. So you don't have to shake it quite as much. And then we're going to add 2 to 4 drops of Angostura bitters. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And then we're going to tumble that up over some ice. We'll pour it out through our strainer. It's going to get a little bit cloudy because of the bitters. It's got some small particles in it, but that's the way it's supposed to be. And then afterwards, we're going to put in 2 to 5 drops of distilled water. Now what this does is it brings the oils in the rye out, because obviously oil and water don't mix, so they separate a little bit. So you get like a nice layer of really spicy, flavorful oils right on top of your drink. So the first drink you take is going to be like, it's going to explode in your mouth. And then what we're going to garnish with is some orange peel or orange zest. And what I suggest you do is you muddle a little bit of orange peel inside of your glass before you pour it. And it releases all those oils into your drink, and it's delicious. Put it that way. And that's it. Pretty simple, pretty easy. Back to the show.
And we are back with our episode, with our regularly scheduled programming.
Yes.
So today we are talking about Dr. No. And he's also known as the Ohio Every time I look at that word, I say prostate. Ohio prostate killer.
That sounds terrible.
It sounds like a terrible serial killer. No, he's called the Ohio Prostitute Killer and the I-71 Killer. And this is he kills along the interstate that runs between New York, Pennsylvania, and Illinois.
Ohio?
Yeah, Ohio and Illinois.
Oh, and Illinois. Okay.
Yeah, and Illinois. And he was active between 1981 and 2004, with the bulk of his killings being between 1986 and 1988. But before we get into all of our victims and all of that, let's talk about the news. The big news from this time period.
And what year are we picking?
We are picking 1986 because that's when the bulk of his killings start, and then he sort of peters off in 2000 or in 1978 and 88, 87 and 88. Sorry, 1987 and 1988. He sort of trails off, but the bulk is in 1986.
Okay.
So big news. For 1986, you were born.
Yeah, of course. That was the most famous person born that year.
Exactly.
You know, not Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen, or... Those are like the only two I really know off the top of my head. There's like 3 other famous people, but...
Yeah, I believe Billie Eilish.
She's not that old.
Yeah.
She's in her mid-30s.
I think so. I could have sworn it said her name on there.
I could be wrong. I assumed she was younger.
But here are our big news stories that kept you from knowing about Dr. No.
Is that with a K or an N?
That's with an N. Like, no, don't touch me.
Okay.
Which would have been an apt description that these women would have used. So our first news story comes out of the year in January. So right at the start of the year, you got the first PC virus brain starts spreading through computers.
And that's why you should buy an Apple. Because they don't get viruses. And that at least that's what I was told when I was a kid. You can't get a virus on a Mac.
You can.
Yeah, no, it's an absolute lie. But Macs before Macs were really popular, people who created viruses didn't care about the number of people with Macs, so they never created viruses for them.
And we also had another news story was the Internet Mail Access Protocol, which was the precursor to email starts.
Well, I guess that's how they spread the virus, right?
Yeah. So that was a little interesting tidbit. Now, we have a couple of really big news stories. Like, I mean, huge. These were massive news stories. So we had the explosion of the space shuttle, the Challenger, which was dubbed the Challenger disaster.
How creative.
Yeah.
A disaster happened on the Challenger. What should we call it? Oh, we'll call it the Challenger disaster.
Yes. And that would be the space shuttle that detonates 73 seconds after launch from Cape Canaveral, Florida. And that kills all 7 astronauts, including a school teacher who won a lottery to be the first teacher in space or something.
The first
civilian.
First I want to say citizen, but that's wrong.
Yeah, which was it's kind of a shitty lottery to win. You know,
she was probably excited at the time.
You know, foresight being 2020.
It's hindsight.
Oh, hindsight.
If your foresight's 2020, that means you can see into the future.
Who says I can't? Yeah, so in hindsight, not the best lottery to win. Now, the next one is also a pretty huge news story. And in fact, like, it's still talked about today. We have the Chernobyl disaster. And that's the nuclear power plant in the Ukraine that at the time was part of Russia, the USSR, Soviet Union. And that's the nuclear plant that has a meltdown, and it kills at least 4,000 people and causes $7 billion worth of damage.
Yeah, this still has massive impacts on our current political climate. People just really don't like don't like nuclear, and they'll bring up the Chernobyl accident
Yeah.
pretty often.
Now, the next news story you got kind of excited about.
Yeah, I didn't realize this happened this year. Being kind of a sports fan, not really into soccer, but this is pretty famous. Almost anyone who even passingly was paying attention to sports has probably heard of the Hand of God game. And that happened in June that year as Argentina played England. Diego Maradona basically cheated, and the refs let him get away with it. He punched the ball in with his hand, into the goal with his hand, and the refs just didn't call it. And in the interview afterwards, he was asked, "Did your hand touch the ball?" And his response was, "The only thing that touched the ball was the hand of God."
Oh,
So that's how it got its name.
such a cop-out, man. Like, yeah, well, obviously he's not going to go out there and admit that he cheated, like, on, like, live news.
I think to this day, he still denies it.
Oh my god, that is a dick move, man. Like, if I did it and it was like an honest mistake and the refs just didn't catch it, I would have been like, no, I can't.
No, you wouldn't have.
Like, I mean, if that's the one, if that's the, I guess not. I mean, if it's the game that sends you to the finals, then yeah. And I think it did send them to the finals because I think it was Argentina versus
It was Argentina versus England.
Yeah, for this, but I don't think that was the actual final match, the final game.
No. This was but this was the elimination rounds. So England was super pissed. And you know, all the hooligans over in England, they like their football.
The foosball. I didn't know about this at all until I saw it. So thanks for talking about it, babe.
Well, you're not exactly a sports fan, but this is like up there with like the biggest sports controversies in the history of
Yeah.
sports.
See, this is why I have you here. You are my gun expert, my sports reference. You handle everything not related to the killers.
Yeah, I do know a lot of random facts about just stupid stuff.
Well, did you know this random fact about 1986? That is the year that the disease known as mad cow disease is found in the United Kingdom's cattle and causes like major farming reform.
Yeah, you shouldn't let cattle eat themselves.
Yeah, that's a terrible thing. Like, don't feed, chickens to chickens or beef to cows. That's just terrible. It's like cannibalism. Ugh. That is also, this is also the year where the Human Genome Project is started. Sorry, guys. We just got interrupted by little Miss Pandora here. Now she wants a cuddle while we're recording. So that's okay. I'll just hold her and talk about some of these more news stories. So we have the Human Genome Project is started. And that launches to understand what is in the human makeup. The
DNA.
The DNA of a human being. And I think this is when they start looking at diseases and everything too, the genetics of diseases. So this spawns a whole bunch of things that we're still studying even today. Also, this was probably big news. The U.S. banned smoking on all public transportation. So that included planes, trains, buses, everything but your personal vehicle.
I bet you people were pissed off.
You can tell this was probably a huge story all the way from coast to coast. Just insane.
Well, I remember when they banned smoking inside of bars in New Jersey. People
were like, I only went to New Jersey to smoke.
Well, no, all of a sudden they started coming across the river.
Because why would you go to Jersey? Why would you go to Jersey for any other reason?
Because you live there?
Nobody proudly admits that they live in Jersey. And then we have one last interesting news story. We have the Iran-Contra affair. And that's when President Ronald Reagan's administration sells basically weapons to an enemy of ours, Iran, who is at this time is an enemy of the United States. They weren't friends with us. So that is it for that. But now we have the seedier side, which is personally my favorite side of the news, is the seedy side. If it bleeds, It leads.
Except for on our podcast, where it's second.
Yes. Well, yeah.
Actually, it's third. It's behind my drinks.
Yeah.
If it bleeds, it's page 3. See what I did there?
That's pretty great, John. That is definitely staying in. All right, so these are our main bleeding cases here that stole the headlines from our news. Well, our topic in the news. Now, in February, we had the murder of Shirley Ray Rasmussen. She was a 29-year-old nursing administrator who was shot dead in her Los Angeles home, and it went unsolved for 23 years. Fast forward 23 years, and they apprehend the suspect, which ended up being an LAPD detective named Stephanie Lazarus.
She was probably already collecting her
Pension.
her pension at that point.
Probably.
That's kind of weird.
Yeah, and the whole reason why she committed the murder was like some jealousy over an ex-boyfriend who was married to Sherry, which is crazy. And she ended up receiving a 27-year life sentence, and is not eligible for parole until 2028. The next story you found really interesting. It was the infamous FBI shootout in Miami that results in the death of 2 FBI agents and the wounding of 5 others.
Yeah, this was big in the law enforcement world. Basically, what happened was everyone went from using revolvers until this happened, and then they realized that they should probably have a few more bullets. And within the decade, everyone had switched to semi-automatics.
That's crazy.
So this Glock basically has their entire company success, at least in firearms, based on this.
Wow.
Because everybody there was carrying probably Smith & Wesson or Colt revolvers, and they ran out of bullets, basically.
Yeah, so they ran out, and they were just like, shit, maybe we should have more rounds in here. Because what, they didn't hit the target, obviously, quick enough.
Well, yeah, their standards, actually, the FBI has, like, horribly low standards for their agents, for their marksmanship.
You would think that they would have higher standard.
The FBI doesn't get in shootouts very often. If you, 99% of all the things the FBI does probably doesn't involve using handguns at all.
That's true.
It's a lot of computer forensics, stuff like that.
All right, well, FBI, please update your standards.
Well, the thing is, you don't want some like computer genius not be able to join the FBI because he can't hit the broadside of a barn with a gun.
I still feel like if you're in law enforcement, that's kind of an important thing to know.
Not if you are probably never going to use it. Like, don't get me wrong, there's anyone who has to shoot a gun in the FBI can shoot a gun. Most of the people in the FBI never have to. And they use rifles most of the time anyway, so.
So we have one last story, and that would be, this one hops over to the UK. So this one here was the Greater Manchester Police announced that they will search for the bodies of 2 of the missing children that were murdered in is now known as the Moors murder, which was 2 killers, and it was a male and a female. It was Ian Brady and Myra Hindley, and they confessed to murdering, I believe it was 4 total. Like,
I've never heard of this. It's
a real interesting case out of the UK. All right, guys. Let's move into our murders. So there is a bunch, okay? So I think I have about 10 or 11. 9 of them are confirmed. The others, I believe they didn't have enough evidence to link, but they're so similar in the MO that they linked them together that way. Now, our first victim was the body of a young woman found in Miami County on April 24th. And that is Miami County, Ohio, not Florida. It's
because
distant cousin.
There is no Miami County in Florida. It's a city inside of Dade County.
She was found in a wooded area. At the time of her discovery, there was no personal belongings on her, no documents. So they had no identification. She was just a Jane Doe, an unidentified person. They nicknamed her the Buckskin Girl because of a tasseled buckskin poncho she was wearing. And it wasn't until 2018 that she was finally identified as Marcia King. When she was found, she was missing a few of her clothing items, which were her shoes and her underwear. So he obviously took...
You assume she was wearing underwear. She was a hooker.
They're not sure if this one here was a hooker, a prostitute.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not being politically correct. A prostitute. A sex worker.
Yes. I mean, listen, John, there are just some jobs we don't want to do. As a woman, there's some jobs and they provide a service.
We can start an OnlyFans for you. I got nothing against prostitutes. They provide a service. People are willing to pay for said service. Go ahead. You do you.
And she went missing from the Union 76 truck stop in Austintown. A lot of victims are going to go missing from this very same truck stop. I don't believe that there was any evidence that this particular victim was a prostitute. She might have been a hitchhiker. They're not sure on this one. The other ones, it's clear because they have police records. But at this time, they didn't know that if she was a prostitute or just a hitchhiker. But she was last seen at the Union 76 truck stop.
I'm gonna start hitchhiking across the country now.
Sounds like a terrible idea. Like, I have never once heard of anything good happening from somebody hitchhiking across the country. They usually end up dead.
You wanna know what? They thought it was a terrible idea for Frodo to go on his adventure too. So
did that not turn out to be a terrible idea?
No, it was awesome.
Oh my gosh, poor Samwise. I feel like I would be the Sam to your Frodo.
You're not coming with me.
Now, our second victim her name is Marcia Matthews, and she was 25 years old. She was found by a trucker 1 mile away from that very same truck stop, that Union 76 truck stop that I was talking about earlier. And she was found strangled to death. She was hit in the head with a blunt object, which caused a traumatic brain injury. And she was also missing some of her clothing items, shoes, underwear, and personal belongings. Our third victim was found on July 20th of 1986. And this would be the 23-year-old prostitute, Shirley Dean Taylor. She was beaten and strangled to death, just like our previous two victims. Now, before her disappearance, she was last seen at the Union 76 truck stop, where witnesses reported that she said that she was meeting up with a client. And that client, the nickname that he went by was Dr. No. Okay.
I wonder if is there like other Dr. No's?
Yeah, it was like a common name that they would give like one of their Johns. John?
I wonder why.
I don't know. I guess maybe it might have been like he might have been like a guy that seemed sophisticated, but had like a dark side kind of thing, maybe. I don't know. But so at this...
It was a film.
Oh.
No, it's a Bond film.
Oh, okay. So like, I guess like maybe is it like these Johns are just picking that as like a nickname? Like instead of giving their real name to the prostitutes?
Yeah, or maybe they looked like him. Oh. Or they had a personality that was similar to him.
Yeah. So that might have been it. At the time, they did not know who this Dr. No was. So they had no identity established for this person. And so Shirley Dean was found a few miles from where she disappeared from. And like all the other victims, her underwear and shoes were missing. That brings us to our fourth victim. And she was found in December of 1986. And that was the 18-year-old prostitute April Barnett. She also went missing from the Union 76 truck stop. And her body was found a few days later, 70 miles away from Austintown. She was beaten and strangled to death and had clothing items missing as well. So you can sort of see the common link between all of these cases. They're all beaten, strangled so far, and they're all missing clothing items. Shoes, underwear.
So he's taking trophies.
Yeah, so he's taking trophies. Now, the fifth victim, 28-year-old prostitute Jill Allen, was found murdered in Illinois near Interstate 70. Even though she was found in another state, she was deemed to be a victim of the same serial killer because of the same modus operandi. She was beaten and strangled to death, and she was missing her shoes, bra, and her underwear. Now, victim 6 was a 27-year-old Anne Marie Patterson, and she went missing on February 7th of 1987 from our favorite truck stop. And her semi-decomposed body was found 40 days later and 250 miles away from Austintown, near Cincinnati. Like, he drove her like 250 miles. That's insane. Now, a week before she disappeared, she was arrested by police for prostitution. And at the police station, she gave information about a murder suspect. And she described his car to them. During the investigation of her disappearance, law enforcement agencies discovered that she had made a CB radio appointment with a client of hers nicknamed Dr. No.
Durno?
Yeah, Witnesses said that she characterized this guy negatively when she would talk about this person.
Well, there you go. It was a Bond villain, so maybe it was just like any of the Johns they didn't like.
Yeah, like a bad trick.
Well, they're the trick. It's...
I thought it was the opposite way around.
No.
Okay. At this point, they've had this name come up 3 times in 3 separate cases. So the police and the media pick it up as a moniker for this guy and start identifying him as Dr. No in the newspapers. Sadly enough, though, it doesn't make it much further beyond those few states news-wise because they're all prostitutes. And we all know that police don't particularly care what happens to prostitutes, especially in like Illinois,
the
Ohio,
Midwest.
The Midwest, yeah. They just don't have enough resources to investigate their cases. So they're going to investigate a case of, a good, like, upstanding citizen versus a prostitute. They're going to investigate that case before they look at a prostitute's case. That's all I'm saying.
Apparently, we need to update our security software. That's what the computer's saying.
We have our 7th victim, and this victim turns up on August 10th of 1987 and is found in Englewood. Now, this victim is wearing their jeans and underwear, which are pulled down to their ankles, but their upper clothing are missing. And according to the forensics found at the scene, it appeared that the killer murdered them in the car and then threw them out of the car due to the grass impressions and the tire tracks located at the scene. The autopsy revealed that the victim was a young woman. She was 20 to 25 years old, and she died from strangulation. She was found with all of her jewelry, so they assumed that she wasn't killed for, like, robbery. So she had all of her jewelry, so he didn't take any of that. He took her t-shirt and her bra. This victim, she had a lot of tattoos. They said that she had an abundance of tattoos on her body. So it just shocks me that she remained unidentified until 2010. And she was identified as Paula Beverly Davis. She was 21 years old. And the reason why she got identified was because her family saw the pictures of her tattoos in the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, which got added to the internet.
Oh, I was about to say, like, they just didn't bother to look for her for, like,
well, I'm sure they were
25 years.
I'm sure they were looking for her, but the United States is huge. And if somebody's not using their Social Security card or anything like that, I mean, prostitutes aren't known for filing 1099s, right?
But I don't understand what you're talking about. You don't think they would have went to the police and be like, hey, this lady with a bunch of tattoos, which, by the way, in 1986, tattoos weren't particularly popular, and women with tattoos were, like, unheard of.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, she was a prostitute. They didn't really investigate those.
Well, they just have a body. You'd think that, like, The family comes up, hey, this lady with a bunch of tattoos. Oh, yeah, that lady.
Well, she might not have went missing. She was found in Englewood. I'm not sure exactly where she went missing from. State's huge, and if they're not talking to each other, the police departments, they don't know that there's a body that has tattoos in 2 towns over.
I don't know. This seems weird.
So she was included by the task in these cases by the task force that was started in 1991. But there were some other theories as to her death. One of them was there was a suggestion that it was a drug-related offense thing, that it was like a drug dealer retaliation against her, and that's how she ended up dead, or that there was this mysterious unknown woman that was last seen in her company. So they thought that this case might not have been related to the serial killing. 8th victim was found on November 22nd of that year, and that would be the body of 19-year-old LaMonica Cole, and she was discovered at a truck stop in Breezewood, Pennsylvania. That's, I believe, out near Pittsburgh, out that way.
Well, it ain't anywhere near this side of the state, I can tell that much.
Despite the fact that the truck stop was located in another interstate, Cole was included as a potential victim because she also died of strangulation, and she was originally from Ohio. And her personal things were never recovered, just like that of the other 7 victims. Now, during the investigation of her case, LaMonica's pimp, a 24-year-old Derek Mims, told police that the alleged killer with whom Cole left on the day of her disappearance was traveling in a blue semi-trailer truck that had white stripes down the side of it.
It's got to be rough for a pimp in this area at this time. You're just getting all your merchandise stolen.
Yeah, just like losing all your merchandise, ending up dead.
That is the worst possible way to talk about another human being.
It is. It's it's like talking about somebody as a commodity.
I mean, they are selling their body. That's kind of...
I mean, hey, I think it's cool, like, if you're, like, doing it yourself, but once you get a pimp involved...
No, pimps serve an important purpose.
Protection.
Protection,
it's a protection racket.
Not just protection, it's also... Like, don't get me wrong, the fact that it's illegal makes pimps, like, pieces of shit because no one reports all the bad stuff they do. But yeah, they provide protection, and they're basically an advertising agency.
Huh.
Or like an agent. Like if you were an actor or something, you got an agent. Well, if you're a prostitute, you got a pimp. They find you work.
Okay. Be my pimp babe.
So as long as pimps are like not beating the crap out of their women, and I shouldn't say not their women, beating the crap out of women and actually treating them with respect. Like, pimps actually serve a purpose. I know, I'm like the only person in the world who's going to start defending pimps. But they do serve a legitimate function. Like if you own a brothel, you're essentially a pimp.
And we all know brothels civilized the West. During the Wild West.
That is 100% true.
It is.
And if you want to talk about feminism, prostitutes in the West in the 19th century.
I'm saying, if I would have to live in that time period of like the 1800s, I would probably want to run a brothel. I would have had financial free, like, you would just be free. Like,
yeah, it was the first time in American history that women were financially independent.
Yeah. And in fact, I believe there was a state, it was the Wyoming? Or no. It was like a Midwest state, and they were the first to give women the right to vote. I
guess in local elections, maybe.
Yeah, in their local elections. Basically because the madam of all the madams of the local brothels was like, nah, we're not servicing you men right now. Not until we got the right to vote. And they were just like, shit. Okay, yeah, you can have the right to vote. There you go.
That's powerful.
If you hold sex over somebody, I guess it's powerful. But I guess back then, like, I mean, I don't know what the ratio of men versus women was, but
Out west in horse-drawn carriages?
yeah. Like,
It
I was sure it would be
an
like
absurd number to 1.
like 25 to 1, 35 to 1, like, or are we talking like 100 to 1?
Either it doesn't really matter at that point. Like, either one of those numbers is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like,
that is crazy.
you got to go read Renegade History of the United States.
Yeah.
By
Check that out, guys.
By Thaddeus Russell.
Yes, real interesting. Victim 9 was 30-year-old Terry Rourke. Rourke. She was murdered on March 29th, 1988. That's the year I was born.
That was only 9 days after you were born.
Yep. In New York City. Well, New York State. Her body was found on one of the bridges over the Mohawk River. The medical examiner found that she had been hit in the head, so she suffered a traumatic brain injury that occurred during a beating with a blunt object several hours before her body was discovered. Now, this one here, there was no signs of strangulation, so I'm going to assume that she was basically bludgeoned to death. Now,
yeah, you ain't got to strangulate someone, you just beat to death.
Yeah, exactly. Like all the other victims, she was missing her underwear and her shoes. Those items were never found. Lead investigators on this included her in the list of potential victims of Dr. Now. Because of the similarities, the fact that she was missing the clothes, and that she was beaten to death. Our 10th victim...
It's a pretty big gap. This is 2 years later.
Yeah, this one is 2 years later. She is found on April 19th of 1990. And she was also found near a truck stop on I-70. Most of her clothing was missing. However, her panties were still there. So not her panties were missing, but her shoes, her pants, her shirt, her bra. An autopsy concluded that she died from a traumatic brain injury resulting from a beating. She had had intercourse 12 to 24 hours before her death.
As prostitutes be doing.
Yes. I mean, it is the service that they provide most. With the similarities, the investigators came to the conclusion that she was also a possible victim of Dr. No, and that she had fallen prey to the serial killer. Despite multiple attempts to identify her, she remains unidentified, and she is listed as Jane Doe 2. In 2017, she's finally identified as Patricia Corley. Patricia Annette Coyley. Anita Coyley. Patricia Anita Coyley. And that is all of our known victims. I'm sure somebody like this probably has many more, especially if it's possible that he's a trucker.
Yeah, this is probably just the ones they tied in this area together.
Yeah.
But there's probably other areas.
Yeah, because at this time, I don't think that they had APHIS, which is the government's their crime database. So it's a database that has all of the murders that happen, all the crimes that get put into this system, and they can cross-check them across the United States. Just open it, babe. It's fine. Sorry, guys. He's a little peckish, wants some almonds. You good?
You're peckish.
Now, let's get into our investigation. During the investigation, the police interviewed hundreds of prostitutes, pimps, and service station employees, as well as truckers, to see if they could find witnesses and identify the offender. Now, according to a lot of the witnesses, the killer appeared to be a tall, large man with fair skin and dark hair, aged 25 to 40. He wore glasses and talked with an accent matching that of someone from the northeastern states.
So I'm assuming that means a Boston accent.
Yeah, I'm going to assume that it's like a New York, Boston, Massachusetts accent. Now, the vehicle he was driving was described as a 1984 silver truck with a wind blocker and a red hood.
No, that's different than the other one. The other guy said a blue truck with white stripes.
And I have to say that this was probably one of the largest, searches ever done. Like, with volunteers handing out flyers of this identikit. This was, huge. This was, multi-state. So, the Ohio State Police Department, with its volunteers from various civil community organizations, post over 4,000 photographs of the victims and the identikit of the offender at 130 truck stops and service stations. They also post around another 1,500 at more truck stops through 9 other states that this motorway passed through. They offered a reward of $10,000 for information leading to the apprehension of Dr. No. As a result of this reward and everything, there was 5 people who were detained that at different times used the nickname Dr. No with several other prostitutes. Unfortunately, no charges were ever filed against any of them. And forensics, they found on most of the bodies were biological traces. So they did find DNA at these scenes on some of the victims. And according to the investigators, it came from the perpetrator, that there was no other way that evidence could get there except by the killer or whoever they last had sex with. But since there was no other incriminating evidence found at the scenes, such as fingerprints or pieces of clothing, a lot of these cases could not be solved that way. You know? They just didn't have a lot of evidence. I mean, it's stranger killings, basically. Like, they know it's a John that's picking them up, taking them somewhere, killing them, dropping their bodies somewhere. So they're missing a crime scene. They're finding the drop site, but they don't have the crime scene. So they're missing a lot of evidence there.
There's also no witnesses or anything, so
yeah,
they got a lot of obstacles.
Yeah. And I mean, prostitutes are known as being a portion of our society that they do a job that is illegal, so there's secrecy involved in doing the job that they do, and it puts them in a very dangerous position because it's not legal. You know, you're more likely to get arrested when you go in to make a complaint.
Them and people who sell raw milk. The renegades.
Yeah, renegades. But we do have some suspects. Okay? So let's get into those guys. These dastardly devils. Whatever. I was trying to find something interesting to say right there, and I just couldn't. So the first suspect is Alvin Wilson. In April of 1991, he was a resident of Lake County, Ohio, and he was 36 years old. Wilson worked as a trucker and owned 2 tractor trailers, and his DNA matched some of the hair samples found on some of the victims. He had credit card receipts and other evidence indicating his possible responsibility for the Ohio murders. So not the New York or Pennsylvania ones, just the Ohio. In 1990, he was arrested on charges of assault and attempted murder of a woman in October of 1989. After his arrest, the girl contacted police stating that in 1986, Wilson had picked her up at an Akron, Ohio, after paying for her services. And he had attempted to strangle her, and he did beat her afterwards. But Wilson was tested against the other DNA. The results were inconclusive. So he was, put onto the back burner. The next suspect, oh man, I'm going to butcher this last name.
John Fountainberry.
Yes, John Fountainberry. That same year, he was a long-haul trucker and was arrested for several murders committed across 4 states.
Jeez. I didn't know truckers were so violent.
It is actually one of the most prevalent jobs for a serial killer.
Because it's so easy to get away with it?
Oh, yeah. He was briefly considered a suspect in the killings, but was later ruled out as his modus operandi and victim profile were different. They just didn't have anything to link him. DNA didn't match. Just didn't even put him on a back burner. They just tossed his file out. And he was already going away for life because 4 murders. Our third suspect is James Robert Cruz, Jr. And in June of 1994, he was a 36-year-old trucker from Ohio. So he was convicted of a murder in March of 1993, and that was the murder of 17-year-old Dawn Marie Birnbaum in Center County, Pennsylvania. Dawn's body was found along Interstate 80, and she was discovered a few days after her death. Most of her clothes were missing. Cruz was considered a possible suspect in the Ohio killings. His DNA was tested, but no charges were filed because it did not match. He murdered somebody and was convicted in 1993 of that murder. So it was a similar case, but the DNA didn't match. Our next suspect is Sean Patrick Globe. In 1995, the 28-year-old Sean Patrick, a truck driver from North Carolina, who had admitted to killing 2 prostitutes in Tennessee in April of that year, was among the suspects for the murders of a North Carolina woman in 1995. As a trucker, he traveled through dozens of states across the country. A few of those where cases of disappearing and murdered prostitutes began popping up along the highway. Following his arrest, Globe was investigated for murder in at least 10 states. He was cleared of suspicions of being Dr. No, because, like I said, his DNA was tested. It did not match. At the time of the first murder in 1981, he was still in high school. And in the mid-80s, when a majority of the killings took place, he was serving in the Army and was stationed outside of Ohio.
It's a pretty good alibi.
Yeah. The next guy...
That timeline doesn't make any sense.
What?
In 1995, he was 28. 1981 would have been 4. Oh, I guess he could have been a freshman.
Yeah. He was in high school. So our next suspect is Delmus Colvin. And in November of 2005, on the basis of a DNA profiling, authorities arrested 46-year-old Colvin, a truck driver who killed 5 prostitutes in Toledo. Colvin later admitted to killing at least 2 others in New Jersey, but vehemently denied that he was involved in the Dr. No murders during the 80s.
That's beneath him. He can't be known for those murders.
Yeah. Now, all of those guys did not pan out.
Yeah, they were the good guys in this story.
They were terrible human beings, babe. All right, but this guy, he done did it.
He done did it. D-U-N did it.
D-U-N did it. All right. So this is Samuel Legg. And in early 2019, he was arrested.
Oh, crap. 2019?
Yep. And he was 49 years old. And he was arrested in Arizona. Now, using DNA profiling, law enforcement agencies were able to prove his guilt in 4 of the murders in Ohio and Illinois. They found the first murder he committed in 1989. He was 20 years old at the time.
I was just about to say, he was a youngster.
Yeah. So his initial arrest was due to a match for an unsolved 1997 rape of a minor in Medina County, Ohio, where he was extradited and sent to stand trial. In the fall of 1990, Legg was suspected in the murder of his stepdaughter as well. And she was 14-year-old Angela Hicks in Ellery, which is in Ohio. But as there is not enough evidence, he was never charged with that. But he was charged and convicted of 4 of our murders. It is suspected that he killed all of them.
So what you're saying is this guy got away with 6 murders?
Yeah.
At least.
He got away with a bunch of the first ones because the case that they linked him to was one from 1989, and I believe it was a couple of the other ones. But yeah, he basically got away with the other 6. Well, what they say is they close it and they say that he's responsible for all of them.
But they're just not going to try him.
Convicted on 4. Yeah, because once they have him in there for a life sentence or death penalty, there's no point in trying the other cases. So they just close it and then they link it to the other ones. And they just say, he is suspected of killing the remaining victims. We talked all about this case, and I hope I gave everybody a good overview of all of the information I was able to find. I hope you guys enjoyed the show tonight, and I'm just going to close this out with remember guys, stay sexy and don't get murdered.